The Psychology of Criminal Conduct, Chapter 15, A General Personality and Cognitive Social Learning Perspective of Criminal Conduct, Summary and Conclusions. The final chapter sets out what is known and where are serious gaps in knowledge. The chapter will also contrast the R&R model with two competing perspectives on reducing criminal behavior. Decitance and the Good Lives model. First, we look at all the three types of understanding set for PCC. 1, an empirical understanding. 2, a theoretical understanding. And 3, an understanding of practical value. All in all, this chapter should provide a concise summary of evaluation of the key of PCC. A distinct preference for general understandings is stated within each of the domains of research, theory, and applications. Important differences between girls and boys, women and men, the young and older, and the rich and the poor are well established in the domains of risk, need, and general responsivity. Likewise, the differences among and within community correction, halfway houses, jails, and prisons are so great that serious understandings of assessment and intervention must make some setting specific accommodations. In addition to the obvious differences, there are a host of nuanced differences. At the same time, similarities and differences are not simply assumed to exist or asserted to exist, but are empirically explored. The empirical explorations strive to respect general theoretical positions along with gender-informed, racially informed, and/or other specific considerations. Likewise, theoretical considerations in regard to settings are open for investigation. Empirical understanding. The rational empirical roots of the psychology of crime induce a healthy skepticism when summarizing research findings. They also feed a respect for evidence. The public has a right to hear what has been learned, and the people in positions to influence revitalization of human service should know why they should support direct treatment services. 1, incident and prevalence of criminal activity. A substantial variation in the criminal behavior of individuals. People differ in the frequency of criminal activity and in the number, type, and variety of criminal acts in which they engage. In addition, while accounting for disproportionate amount of the total criminal activity, the more criminally active persons tend not to be specialists. These findings are apparent across methods of measurement, particular types of offense, and they are found within the typical indicators of social location such as geography, age, race, ethnicity, gender, and social class. B, early and late starters. The development criminologists have shown that there is a considerable value in recognizing two major sets of justice-involved persons. The early starters, who tend to persist in their criminal activity, and late starters, who tend to desist. Of course, the life course persistent and the adolescent limited typologies hide the fact that many within either group will show different patterns of being in and out of crime at different times. C, chronic and serious violent offenders. As dramatic as is the image of life course persistent delinquency, it is a small minority who are repeat violent offenders. In and around Phoenix, Arizona, only 1% of cohort of 151,209 persons was charged with 2 or more violent offenses over their youthful criminal career. Snyder, 1998. D, generality and specificity. In regard to criminal pathways, and not surprisingly in view of the well-established gender differences in the base rate of offending, males are overrepresented on the life course persistent pathway. Relative to females, however, the long-term consequences of being on the early and persistent pathway are characterized by gender similarities in terms of adult violence, poor health, poor mental health, and poor socioeconomic circumstances. 2. The correlates of criminal activity. A number of conclusions may be drawn in regard to the correlates of crime, and they are found in the central 8 risk-need factors. The major risk-need factors may be conceptualized in other ways. For example, components of the antisocial personality pattern and criminal history may be pulled together within the label of psychopathy, as Robert Hare has done with the PCLR. Travis Hershey's definition of weak control could incorporate the totals of the central 8. Others, taking a theoretical position, will let a statistical procedure determine what specific indicators within and across categories are selected to create an efficient prediction formula. Example, the Bragg assessment and many of the second-generation instruments described in Chapter 10. Another approach would be to sum assessments across the central 8 and call the resulting score an assessment of a general propensity for rule violations, as in the case of the LSCMI General Risk Need Score. The Central 8. An abbreviated version of the Central 8 is outlined in Table 15.1 with the description of how the factors can serve as treatment targets. Note that addressing the risk need factors involves building personal prosocial strengths, thereby reducing risk. Overall, the estimate for the predictive validity of the Central 8 as measured by the LSCMI subcomponents is in the range of R equals 0.12 to 0.31 over ETL 2014. These predictive values are significant. The CI does not include 0 and greater than that achieved by risk need factors in the minor set, such as the lower class origins and personal emotional distress. The Central 8 is also relevant to the prediction of violent recidivism, with RS ranging from 0.09 to 0.23 over at ETL 2014. 4. Wide applicability. The same sets of risk factors appear to be involved within categories of geography, class, age, gender, race, and ethnicity. Furthermore, the correlations with crime of these biological and social location variables are reduced, if not eliminated. When controls are introduced for the stronger of the personal and interpersonal risk factors, remaining to be documented is whether the correlation between gender, ethnicity, race, class, and crime that remains after controlling the major personal and interpersonal factors is actually a result of the processing effects suggested by the social inequality versions of criminological theories. The same risk factors apply across different types of criminal behavior. Although crime-specific indicators of pro-criminal attitudes, associates, and behavioral history may be most useful when the focus is on violence or sexual offenses. For example, laboratory assessment of deviant sexual arousal may enhance predictive validity when working with pedophiles. Similarly, assessments of history of violence will enhance the prediction of violent offenses. Here is the graph or the chart of the Central 8. Should you wish to read that? The ability to influence crime. Meta-analysis of treatment programs that tap into the GPCSL-based and empirically informed knowledge of risk need factors will reduce reoffending to a significant degree. The reviews have drawn on two aspects of the GPCSL perspective on crime to provide clear guidance on effective correctional treatment. In brief, and first, assign service that is in adherence with the principle of risk, need, and general responsivity. R&R. Second, deliver treatment that adheres to R&R with integrity. The evidence suggests that non-adherence with the principles of R&R has either no effect on crime or increases crime. Other variables and considerations do influence the overall level of crime reduction achieved through adherence to risk, need, and responsivity. The range of known variables is found in the full R&R model. Refer back to Table 9.1. Notably important is the concept of criminogenic needs as intermediate targets of change in treatment programs. Prior to 1990, treatment was often directed at addressing non-criminogenic needs. Example, self-esteem, anxiety. Only the criminogenic needs of substance misuse and uncontrolled anger received much attention. Even employment and academic programs focused on skill learning without teaching clients how to behave prosocially in the work and school environments. Today, service providers have a much larger view of what needs to be treated. Table 15.2 illustrates some of the findings with reference to targeting the dynamic criminogenic needs of the central 8 risk need factors. The mean effect size associated with targeting this with the central 7 is 0.20. CI equals 0.15 minus 0.25. The mean effect size for targeting non-criminogenic needs is 0.05. CI equals negative 0.03 minus 0.11. The latter mean value is not significantly different than 0 and is significantly lower than the corresponding value for the targeting criminogenic need. Table 15.3 presents a more comprehensive list of criminogenic and non-criminogenic needs. This table may provide service providers with a helpful list of targets for change and a list of targets that may actually run counter to reducing criminal conduct. Many programs try to target many needs of the clients. What we do know is that the more criminogenic needs are targeted relative to non-criminogenic needs, the lower the recidivism rate. Programs that predominantly target non-criminogenic needs are associated with increased crime. This is Principle 9 in the R&R model, breadth. I will go ahead and close in on that. And then here is the criminogenic and non-criminogenic needs, a listing. A theoretical understanding and challenges to GPCSL. The general personality and cognitive social learning GPCSL perspective of criminal conduct embraces the richness of human experience. The pathways to crime are many, and social, cognitive, and personality factors pave the road. The application arm of GPCSL, the R&R model, has proven to be fruitful. Examples of R&R assessments and interventions have already been described and will be summarized further shortly. Although the R&R model has dominated the correctional psychology field, it is not the only paradigm of influence. Two particular alternatives adjuncts to R&R that purport to address weakness and offer enhancements to R&R are the Good Lives model and descendants. 1. Good Lives model, GLM. Some scholars argue that R&R pays insufficient attention to motivation and personal agency and suggest that GLM offers an alternative. GLM differentiates itself from R&R by a focus on a strengths-based and restorative model of rehabilitation. GLM is also is critical of the concept of criminogenic needs because it ignores more fundamental human needs and the pursuit of basic goods. Warden Stewart, 2003. The basic goods are friendship, enjoyable work, loving relationships, creative pursuits, sexual satisfaction, positive self-regard, and an intellectually challenging environment, page 142. Rather than following the R&R direction of reduced criminogenic needs and basic goods will follow. Ward and his colleagues have argued reverse. Achieve basic goods and criminogenic needs will be addressed. Attaining basic goods should be the primary goals for rehabilitation. My colleagues and I have long argued that there is little added value GLM over the R&R. GLM theorists minimize R&R's attention to strengths, i.e. Principle 10, and R&R's acceptance of the importance of motivation. Strengths and motivation are important in R&R. This has already been acknowledged with discussions of motivational interviewing and building collaborative working relationships in R&R-based training programs such as STICS. What is most problematic with GLM is that it places the pursuit of personal fulfillment ahead of criminogenic needs. non-criminogenic needs are important in human terms. However, there is no evidence that personal fulfillment and achieving basic goods without attention to criminogenic needs reduces criminal behavior. Although there is some evidence that GLM-based interventions improve motivation to engage in treatment, there are other approaches to enhancing motivation and building a therapeutic relationship with the therapist. Furthermore, there is yet to be seen any quasi-experimental or experimental evidence that interventions based on GLM are effective in reducing recidivism. 2. Destinance. Strictly speaking, destinance is ceasing criminal activity. However, criminology described destinance as the process by which a justice-involved person stops to engage in criminal behavior. Not all continue in crime throughout their lifetime. Why is it that some people stop or desist? Interest in desistance gained momentum with 2 important studies. The first was by Lubb and Sampson, 2003. They followed up to the age of 70. The original sample of juvenile delinquents first identified by Gluck and Gluck in 1950. The basic findings from the study were that those who desisted from crime found meaningful work and a positive marital relationship. Destinance theory explains the process of crime reduction as increasing ties to convention, i.e. social control theory, chapter 3. Next, we have Shad Maraner's 2001 Liverpool Destinance study. Maraner matched a group of 30 ex-convicts who were crime-free for a year, with 20 offenders still engaged in crime and illegal substance use. They were all interviewed, and their narratives or stories of how they changed or did not change were told. An important feature of Maraner's study was the emphasis on cognitive factors, in particular changes in self-identity. He found that destitutors had a redemptive narrative that emphasized personal responsibility and a motivation to do well. The persisters had a condemnation script and a sense of hopelessness and no choice over their criminal path. The transition from condemnation to redemption is thought to be accelerated by life turning points such as marriage, parenthood, and reaching a milestone in age. Furthermore, turning points appear to apply equally to women and men. The concept of self-narratives has been increasingly important in criminology for drawing attention to self-cognitions and behavior. Does the desistance perspective add value to the R&R model? First of all, there is an underdeveloped theory as to why some desist from crime and others do not. The critical turning points that lead to desistance are major life events that lead to the adoption of a redemption narrative. Family, marital, and employment are certainly important criminogenic needs, but they are not the only ones, as aspects of desistance appear dependent upon seemingly random events such as gaining employment or finding a supportive pro-social partner. In Maraner's interpretation of desistance, the closest to a theory we have is based on labeling theory, where the ex-offender adopts a pro-social identity. However, there is some evidence suggesting that people desist from crime prior to stable employment and marriage. Thus, the direction of causality becomes a serious issue. In contrast to desistance theory, GPCSL specifies the learning process operant and classical conditioning and vicarious learning, and the personal and interpersonal context where behavior is learned. Related to the issue of theory is practical application. Circling back to chapter 1, much of the desistance literature describes intra-individual differences, that is, changes over time within a person. An objective of PCC is not only to understand variations in criminal conduct, but also to inform practical means of influencing behavior. As noted in the preceding paragraph, desistance, or a reduction in recidivism in R&R language, depends on relatively unpredictable life events. Part of the redemptive narrative involves taking personal responsibility for behavior. As Fergus McNeill and his colleagues write, dissisters manage to acquire a sense of agency, of control over their lives. However, little is said about how dissisters actually acquire the sense of agency. At least R&R says that to help people take control of their behavior and become prosocial, one should address the criminogenic needs of the offender using cognitive behavioral interventions. In addition, advocates of dissonance criticize R&R for ignoring strengths in the rehabilitation of offenders, as affirmed earlier. In the full R&R model, the notion of personal strengths is represented as a separate principle. Principle 10, see also Warmth and Troswell, 2022. Finally, there is the question of evidence. Here, dissonance proponents become vague and evasive. The subheading, whose evidence in the article by McNeill, ETL, 2012, is telling. Reminiscent of knowledge destruction, described in Technical Note 11.1, the title itself prepares the reader for a questioning of traditional scientific method. In the section, we are asked to listen to the voices of ex-offenders and those who have supported them. Because they are real experts, later we learn that research is a mechanistic conception, and that to really progress, we need a dialogue between justice-involved persons and their families, academics, practitioners, and policymakers. The so-called Discovering Dissonance Project. Perhaps out of this dialogue, progress will be made, but given that R&R already has a proven track record, is it all necessary? It is difficult to imagine any new or current perspective that would not recognize the importance of the Central 8 and the principles set out in the extended R&R model. There have been steps taken to better align GLM and dissonance theory with R&R. As always, there is room for improvement. More research is needed on specific responsivity, especially with respect to race, ethnicity, and personality. However, the AGPCSL perspective works well or better than any alternative. Cognitive research and service developments in the domains of both personally and interpersonally mediated control promise even more powerful predictions and clinical interventions. An understanding of practical value. 1. Prediction instruments. On the issue of practical prediction, there is no question that change has been revolutionary. Over the last 40 years, unstructured clinical judgment does so poorly relative to structured assessment approaches that the ethicality of unstructured risk assessments is a serious professional issue. As reviewed in Chapter 10, several second-generation instruments do as well as third- and fourth-generation instruments in the prediction of reoffending. However, second-generation instruments that do not sample a variety of criminogenic needs cannot assist in the building of treatment plans that are in adherence with the R&R, nor can their predictive validity be improved through reassessment on static variables. The great promise of fourth-generation instruments is that they will enhance adherence with risk, need, breadth, general responsivity, and specific responsivity. Recall that fourth-generation instruments follow the case management process from initial assessment, case management planning, service delivery, reassessment, and case closure. We are also now on the cusp of the fifth-generation assessment tools with research on the neurobiological correlates of crime. It is only a matter of time before these factors are integrated into assessment process. 2. Prevention and treatment. The R&R principles were summarized in Table 9.1. A major issue is whether the empirically validated principles of the R&R model can be implemented in the real world with sufficient levels of adherence that reduced reoffending is actually achieved. It may appear straightforward, but in fact, it requires major policy and organizational changes and major efforts on the part of managers and staff for adherence to be accomplished. The issue is so important that this text includes a separate chapter on the challenges faced by treatment in the world. As outlined in Chapter 12, many agencies are struggling with the implementation of R&R. However, significant progress is being made as demonstrated by the widespread adoption of risk need instruments, such as the level of service instruments and the training of staff in R&R-based supervisions practices. Examples: STICS, STAR, EPICS. It is important that these and other initiatives continue. Otherwise, we risk returning to another nothing works era that exposes communities to more crime, negates human agency, and destroys hope. A. Specific responsivity. The principle of the specific responsivity needs to be explored and expanded upon. At this point, only the broad strokes are painted. Table 15.4 summarizes current thinking on specific responsivity. The cognitive interpersonal skill level factor combines empathy, interpersonal maturity, self-regulation skills, and verbal intelligence. The treatment recommendation here is that styles of service that are verbally and interpersonally demanding and depend upon highly developed cognitive skills and interpersonal sensitivity be avoided with all justice-involved persons, but the very high-functioning ones. If you are in doubt about this factor, then use the structured cognitive social learning strategies. Avoid the chance of inadvertently increasing crime through low structuring in the main. Always adhere to the principles of general responsivity. But when working with high-functioning persons, one may reduce the structure and build on their exceptional strengths. The remainder of the specific responsivity factors are fairly straightforward. Here is the close-up of table 15.4. B. Gender and motivation. Gender and responsivity and motivational level are particularly interesting. A very lively literature has evolved in regard to women-specific treatment recommendations. Here's the table for that, so you can pause. Entered in the table are the promising intermediate areas of change suggested by those who work with women. Specific responsivity recommendations are also listed. Also noted in table 15.5 are those factors that are compatible with the R&R and those that are less so. Here's table 15. That's table 15.5. Okay. For the purposes of clarity in the expanded R&R model and the normative and specific responsivity principles are very important. Non-criminogenic needs may be set as intermediate targets for humanitarian and entitlement reasons in accordance with the normative principle. Additionally, collaborative treatment planning may establish the motivational value of targeting selected non-criminogenic needs for particular offenders. Motivational interviewing, MI, is creating a level of excitement in the fields of addiction and corrections. MI was introduced in the discussion of substance misuse in Chapter 8. In Table 15.6, the spirit of MI is displayed while also drawing attention to how stages of change are differentially linked to MI interventions. Excuse me. The value of MI is significant, and MI techniques have been interrogated in probation and parole officer training programs such as STICS, STAR, and EPICS. MI builds collaborative relationships and enhances offender motivation to change, preparing clients to learn new pro-social skills and cognitions. And here is table 15.6. The impact of The impact of psychology of criminal conduct. PCC has introduced an alternative view to our traditional criminological understandings of criminal conduct. It is a perspective firmly based on psychology of human behavior. The practical application of PCC through R&R model has influenced the assessment and treatment of justice involved. And here's table 15.7. Persons far beyond Canada. Where the model was first developed and adopted, disseminating PCC is expanded with translations of 5th edition, Japanese, Taiwanese, and soon Spanish and Arabic. Table 15.7 gives the reader a glimpse of some of the applications of R&R around the world. Conclusion and final comments. There now is a human science of criminal conduct. There are empirically defensible theories of criminal conduct that may be helpful in designing and delivering effective service. The literature is reasonably strong and supports vigorous pursuit of ethical, decent, humane, and cost-effective approaches to prevention and rehabilitative programming for moderate and high-risk cases under a variety of conditions. The active and effective human service agency may contribute to still more powerful knowledge base by building assessment, reassessment, R&R-based treatment, and research into the agency. Since the 6th edition of this text, the evidence on the value of PCC and R&R-based understandings continues to grow. A major issue remains: how to make use of what works. The implementation issues remain huge, and one important aspect of implementation is who should own, run, and deliver human service programs in the justice and correctional context. It is dismaying to see low levels of R&R adherence in real-world corrections, as obvious as R&R may appear for many readers. Adherence is a problem in the field. However, there is hope. The widespread use of LS instruments and others based on the Central 8 and the recent R&R-based training programs suggest that in a few years, R&R will become mainstream in corrections. It is also hoped that health and social services that serve justice-involved persons will come to recognize the value of offering programs that build rewarding alternatives to crime for offenders. In closing this chapter in Resource Note 15.1, I offer a personal account of how PCC came to be. I also thank Paul Gundreau for providing some of the early background to the development of PCC and reviewing the resource note. Here's resource note 15.1. Oh, try and get as close as I can. There you go. And this is the end of chapter 15. Thank you.